talking dreams so big that they'll haunt you, or they'll calm you. That's how you know if you gotta go and get to win and not conquer. I had to go out and get it without a sponsor. Kept it real, never crooked, yeah, that's honor. Now I can go out and get it how I want to. Hashtag blessed, I choose.
Good morning, Rumble, YouTube, and Twitter. Welcome back to the Ryan Matta Show. Today is Wednesday, May 8th. It is 10:01 a.m., and we have another great interview. The guest today is Michelle Weekley. I'd like you guys to swing over and please follow her on Twitter. When I talk about guests and people that I've had on my show in different communities and everything that I've done, I don't know if I've ever met somebody who is as highly spoken of as Michelle. So I'm not going to overtalk it. We're going to get to know Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Ryan.
So I want to start from the very, very beginning. I want to learn a little bit about you. So tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up at?
Yeah, so I grew up sort of all over the place. I was initially, I was in outside Philadelphia, and then I went to boarding school. So I grew up there, but I didn't spend that much time there. The place that I really spent the most time, unfortunately, was Washington, D.C. I went to school down there. I was there for like 12 years.
Sorry.
Until I left and went abroad.
So tell me, let's start there from the beginning. Boarding school. How did you end up going to boarding school? What was that like?
It was cool, honestly. I mean, a lot of the shit that you see is true. You know, a lot of the stereotypes are relatively accurate. So it was interesting and kind of wild. I think, you know, the boarding school that I went to was really a feeder school for the Ivy Leagues. So a lot of my friends ended up in Ivy League schools, and there's a lot of interesting perspective that I gain from having had that experience. I did not go to an Ivy League school. I was like the rebel kid. I was a computer science major, so I went to a technical institute. I ended up dropping out. And then I went back into school. I was like in and out of school back in DC for a little while. I did eventually end up graduating, but I went to 3 different schools, and it was, you know, kind of by coercion that I ended up with a degree at all. So I'm team anti-college. Like, just go to work and do something useful.
What was it that led you to boarding school? Were you a rebel without a cause, and mom and dad were like, we're going to put this girl in check? Or what led to you going to boarding school?
So I guess you have to go a little further back. I don't talk about this a lot, but I grew up figure skating, like very, very seriously. I was training for the Junior Olympics. And so I would like leave school. I had tutors, and, you know, in the summer I lived with my coach. I was at the rink like all day, you know, 8-10 hour days. So I ultimately ended up injured, and I sort of was a rebel without a cause. I started playing tennis. And so I played tennis pretty seriously for a couple of years and just needed to do something, right? So I ended up in boarding school and studying there.
Boarding school was your choice, or your parents were like, you started to kind of like mess around and your parents were like, we're gonna send you to boarding school before you make some more mistakes?
It was a little bit of both. I think, you know, once my whole life was consumed with skating. And so when that failed, because I had gotten injured, I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I also had not lived a normal life. So, you know, I've never really conformed in any way. And I spent like 2 years, I think, in regular school, and I wasn't good at it. Like, I just wasn't good with like doing what you were supposed to do and doing what everyone else was doing. I started programming then, actually, and really just spent all of my time on the internet. So that was like the mid 90s. I'm a lot older than people think I am. So I think it was, you know, accumulation of all of those things. You know, I needed something sort of different to do. And so I ended up in boarding school, and that gave me additional opportunities to I went through all of their computer science. It was really just programming at the time. I went through all of those classes and ended up doing like a special research project. And so it gave me something to focus on. And then I also played tennis there. So,
How old were you when you got injured?
um, it was the summer before eighth grade, like what would have been eighth grade. So I don't even know how old you are. I was young. I mean,
Like probably 12 or something.
yeah, like 12 or 13, which is generally like you get to 14, 15. That's like the height of, if you're talking about elite figure skating and gymnastics, that's kind of the height of someone's career. I spent some time in Delaware on the ice with Tara Lipinski. I think we are essentially the same age. So, you know, it was interesting.
What was it like the day that, so your entire life up to that point, you had basically been trained to be this elite athlete, which means when you're operating at that level, your entire world revolves around figure skating. And then was this an injury that built up? Like you had a bad ankle and then it finally got to a point where it was just so bad you couldn't skate? What was it? What was that final injury that caused you
I
to not
had
be able to skate?
a stress fracture in my tibia, and it was on the landing foot. So, you do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
jumping and landing in figure skating. And so, um, my bone literally cracked. So I had to take some time off ice, and we were actually at the time trying to go out. I was supposed to go out to Denver to train at there's an Olympic um, training rink out there. So we were trying to get me back on the ice in time to make that trip. So I was back on the ice sooner than I should have been. And I honestly never landed a jump again. Like I was back on the ice, and when you're training, you're the only person on the ice. So I'll never forget, like, was back on the ice and my coach was up in the stands. You're in this giant arena. I mean, you're like this tiny little person, like going around and around in the rink. And I was trying to land a jump, and I would just jump, hit the ice, and collapse and jump. And she would just scream her face off, go do it again. So I get up and I go to do it again, jump, boom, collapse, because my leg couldn't hold
Mm-hmm.
me up. So I walked off the ice, and I never got back on. I think it was like 10 years before I got back on ice. So when people laugh and tell me that I'm stubborn, I'm just kind of like, yeah, you have no idea. Like, I went into the locker room, called my parents on a payphone and said, come get me. I'm done. This is it. So I
What
went
was
out
that?
in flames.
What was that emotional roller coaster like? How did you process that at such a young age?
I'm not sure that I did, right? I mean, I ended up in boarding school, like running around. I got in a lot of trouble. I went to school. I dropped out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I probably processed it later, much, much later. I spent a lot of time trying to get my life together. So I was,
Tell me about your parents.
my parents, are awesome. I love my parents very much. Everyone in my family is an engineer. So that, that breeds a certain disposition. So I grew up with my dad and my stepmom. My dad is a structural engineer, I think. My stepmom is a biochemical engineer. My mom is a software developer, and I have two brothers, and they're both engineers. So
No way. I'm a
there's a lot of
controls
math,
engineer. I was
huh?
I was doing controls engineering before I got into podcasting in the automotive
That's
industry.
cool.
Yeah, so
All
it's cool.
right.
So tell me about your what's your mom like?
She's cool. We actually have her helping with some of the code at the company. So she does like QA testing. So we have her testing some of the code for our wallet at the company that I work at.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like we really needed, our dev team got to the point where we needed additional resources. We really needed like a QA tester, and I was like, well, I kind of know somebody. So, yeah.
That's really awesome. Tell me about your dad.
He's cool. He's crazy. Like anybody that meets my dad understands, you know, how I got to be the way that I am. Like he will tell you exactly what he thinks, and you know, sometimes to detriment, but he's a great guy. He's super entertaining. He he ran a company for a long time that sold and engineered and supported process control valve equipment. So he was really successful doing that, and you know, retired to Florida, and I get to see them all the time because I live in Florida, so I love it.
Who would you say is the most influential person in your life, and how do you think they impacted you?
Oh man. Um Probably my father. You know, I looked up to him, and I think we're very similar. And so um you know, he has influenced me in many ways. Most of them positive, not all of them. I get myself also in trouble sometimes for just saying exactly what I think. But, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Is that a bad thing, do you think?
I don't think it is. You know, I get a lot of heat for it sometimes. And I guess in America 2024, it's a radical stance to take that we should actually be honest. And I very much despise the fact that we have gotten here. But I've always been this way. People, you know, people follow me online and then they meet me in real life and they're like, "Oh shit, you're actually worse in the real world." Which is true. Like I'm just gonna tell you exactly what I think, and you know, it has come to a place where we're not supposed to do that anymore, right? I think it started many years ago with this concept of political correctness, and they came for that, and then they came for comedy. So, you know, we had to be politically correct, and then we couldn't make jokes anymore. And now we just have to fully fucking comply with anything they want. Like now they can lock us in our homes and try to force vaccinate us, and we're radical extremists because we dare to suggest that maybe it's not a great idea to, you know, act like China. So I guess that makes me a far right extremist, but I am really just someone that will tell you what I think. And, you know, people have asked me, am I worried? Like, do I worry about being as honest as I am? And I tell them, like, sometimes, but if you spoke the fuck up, it would not be a dangerous, you know, people are like, well, look at these whistleblowers, you know, the Boeing shit. And like, you see a lot of examples of people that are speaking up and it doesn't work out so well. But my message to people is really like, that's on you. Like, those extreme situations are the result of too many people being unwilling to speak up. You know, like the Boeing whistleblower thing is a good example. I was running my mouth about that, and people were like, well, look how it worked out for the two people that did speak up. And my response to that is like, if everyone else that they were working with had spoken up and they had done something in numbers, then those people wouldn't have been in the danger that they were clearly in. So for better or worse, you know, everybody needs to speak the fuck up.
If you had to look back at your past life and you look back at a mistake that led to your current success, what past failure or mistake would that be?
That's a good question. And that I actually have a very specific answer for. I was living abroad. I was living in Dubai, and I got recruited to work in foreign direct investment, which is a story that some people, you know, a lot of people have heard. I had a pinned tweet on Twitter for a long time, sort of summarizing that story. And I ignored a lot of gut instinct on that. There were a number of very serious red flags that I just blatantly ignored because I was too tempted by the allure that they were putting in front of my face. You could call it fiat incentives. You know, they spent some time trying to recruit me, and they did a great job. They offered me more money than I'd ever made. They made up some fancy title for me. You know, they basically presented me with an offer that I couldn't refuse. And so I accepted that job. And I don't want to say it was a mistake because, like you said, it led me to where I am now. It led me to Bitcoin. It led me to a lot of great things. But if I had trusted my gut, I would have never taken that job, and I wouldn't have gone through the crazy shit that I went through.
And what was that? What was the shit that led you through that?
Yeah. So FDI stands for Foreign Direct Investment, and that's not a company. That's actually an industry, and it's the industry that primarily surrounds the World Economic Forum. It is the industry that facilitates global money laundering at the highest levels, and and something a lot of people know nothing about, which is absolutely by design. They use, there's all kinds of tactics that they use, but one of the biggest tools is these free trade zones that you see, special economic zones. Again, something I knew nothing about until I got recruited to work in that industry. And so these free trade zones exist kind of outside the letter of the law. They make their own regulations, and they exist, primarily in the really corrupt places. So I've been to free trade zones in Qatar, in Bogota, Colombia. They're all over the world. And, there are exceptions, as with anything. There's free trade zones. There's a lot of people doing business in Dubai. All of the business in Dubai is done through special economic zones. And I would say, not that anywhere is without some level of corruption or malincentive, but there are good ones, right? There's an incredible trade zone that's down in Rohatan where they're really promoting Bitcoin and Bitcoin activity, and they're kind of trying to set up a special community there, which I really, really support. But ultimately, the trade zones are a way that they facilitate a lot of the things that they do globally. So
So what was that? What was the takeaway that you learned from this company?
So I worked for a consulting company that provided services within the FDI space. Sorry. And the takeaway was that everything is corrupt as shit and that everything is built, on lies. Um, the wild stories that you hear are really just the tip of the iceberg. I think one of the short stories that's kind of an easy example that I often give is we provided an economic award that had $300 million attached to it. And the award was provided because it's 2:00 in the morning and we're at a strip club in Thailand. And this guy wants to sleep with that guy's assistant. So yeah, let's give them the award. And then, he'll bring her out and we'll have drinks and it's cool. Oh, and by the way, Michelle, because you're here in this conversation, you're going to fly. I was in Dubai at the time. So I took a first class flight from Dubai to Bogota to present the award, to be in the picture, because they can't just send a random person, because a random person might start asking questions like, why are we giving this office in particular the award? Like, look at that office who did all of these things this year. Like it's wild. So there's all of these decisions that get made. They have nothing at all to do with reality, with what's good for the community. Like there are great economic development offices that are doing good things for the communities that they're in, right? But they're not playing the game. So they don't generally like get the awards and the big money and all of that. And there's kickbacks involved, and there's, the Panama Papers. For people that are listening, my boss, who I was working for at the time, was not allowed legally to enter Panama. Everything that was exposed in the Panama Papers is absolutely true. I was working with the people involved with all of that. And this is just like, this was like 3 days in the 2 years that I spent in this world, and I was a nobody. People ask me like, aren't you afraid to like talk about all this shit? And first of all, I've never said anything that's not 100% true. So, come at me. You're just proving that it's true. But also, like, I'm a nobody. There are much bigger things that are happening. The things that I saw were just like the tip of the iceberg, literally, you know. So yeah.
And what was it that were these people just so confident that the amount of money that they were paying you, that they basically owned you and they could have you as their person that ran around and presented these awards and just carried out whatever business that they wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's the game, right? And absolutely everyone is making lots and lots of money. And so there's that as an incentive, but you also have like ego and career. I mean, much like politicians spend their lives, sort of curating things and making sure that, I'm not going to say that they don't do terrible things, because most of them do, right? But they do it with their friends that they know will keep their secrets. And so it functions in the same way. Another great example that I think is easy for people to understand is like, we toured the ghost cities in China in 2016. And I wrote a thread about that on, I guess X, I keep calling it Twitter, but it was one of the first threads that I wrote about the time that I was in foreign direct investment. And I thought, I have all of these pictures from the ghost cities in China. Like, there's like 1,000 pictures on my phone from 2016. And I'll never forget the last piece that I wrote. And the last thing I wrote was like, so we did these tours, and they're telling us that the residences and the office complexes and stuff are all at like 30-40% capacity. They project 60% capacity within the next year, and there's nobody anywhere. I mean, it's just, they're blatantly lying. But we went along with it because we stood to make a shit ton of money. So the last thing I wrote in that thread was like, then we all went home and pretended that it was true. And that's really the crux of it, is, are you willing to play the game? Are you willing to pretend that it's true? But it doesn't, they don't just take you on day one to China and helicopter you out into a village and say like, lie, it's all lies. There's like a slow buildup. And in retrospect, I can see that, but there's like these little concessions that you make, right? So when I started the job that I had, they wrote a press release announcing that they'd hired me. And my mom called me and she was like, what the fuck is this? Because they said a bunch of stuff that was not true. And I had access to the bio before they printed it. And I went in and said like they said I had a master's degree, and they said that I was like involved in some women's thing, and they just wrote this like trumped up bio of me. And I went in and I was like, this stuff is not true. Like, people are going to know that it's not true. Like, I don't claim to have a master's degree. In fact, I tell people, don't go get an advanced degree. It's a waste of your time. And they literally just looked at me and they're like, oh yeah, we don't care. Like, it's going to make you look good, and that makes us look good. So that's the game. And I should have quit. I should have quit then. But I had given up my whole life. I'd given up a great job that I had. I'd given everything up to take this job. And so not only would I had to like sort of sort that all back out, but I also at the time didn't have the guts to, like, I remember thinking like, do I just quit and tell everyone I'd made a mistake? But it's a hard thing to do. Like, everyone was so proud of me. Like, my parents were so proud of me. I'd gotten this amazing job. I think, people were like, wow, like, it looks like success externally, right?
I see what you're saying.
And that's hard to walk away from, especially like, what do you say? They're lying about me, and I think that's a red flag. so you don't understand the depths of it at the beginning. You don't understand the depths of it until you're really deep in it. And so I think that corrupts people in and of itself, because how do you walk away from that? I had the benefit of the fact that this is not something I chased or desired. It was something I got recruited into. I spent 10 or 12 years working in tech startups, and my background was in computer science, and that was what I cared about, right? I didn't even know what Davos was. I'll never forget, overhearing for this first time a conversation from some people that were trying to get invited to the World Economic Forum. And I'm like on my cell phone Googling, what is the World Economic Forum? I didn't spend 20 years trying to get into this world. I just was in the right place at the right time. I was on a rooftop in Bangkok and got recruited into this job that I had no business being in. So I think that made it easier for me to walk away, but it still took me almost 2 years to burn out and say, okay, I can't do this anymore. So it's complicated. It's difficult. Like, life is hard.
So you're in a meeting in some third world country and you overhear that somebody's selling their secretary for sex, and that's going to get them a $300 million contract. Were you ever put into a position where they were offering to sell you for some large amount of money?
No, I was not. So I did draw some very hard lines, and I have to correct you though, right? Because the way that you frame it is much easier to go, like, it's much easier to say, like, oh shit, like that. I think that makes it really black and white, right? And if that had happened, I probably would have walked away. That's not how it works, right? So we're not in a meeting. We have a business dinner, then we go to drinks, and then drinks turn into the strip club later. And it happens all day, every day on Wall Street. This is not an uncommon sort of night. And as the night progresses, there are conversations that are had, right? And they're not selling some chick, they're making jokes and shaking hands and winking. And, it's more like, oh, yeah, man, she thinks you're cute. I'm pretty sure she'd go on a date with you, like, wink, wink, like it's not black and white by any stretch of the measure. And she's participating too, right? Like,
For sure. There's a lot of money there.
yeah, like, she gets to keep her job. Like, she probably gets a bonus.
Huge bonus.
Yeah. And so, it's not all that black and white.
That's a bizarre world.
It's very bizarre.
When you're talking
So
about, yeah, go ahead.
no, you see all this wild shit that people are, working to expose. And I think it doesn't always get the attention that it should get. And it's because it's really hard to comprehend. Like, I tell these stories and enough time has gone by now. I mean, I look back and I'm like, shit, did that really happen? Like, that's fucking, like, I wouldn't believe me, right? Like, and again, that's another incentive for people not to talk out, is like, it's just so wild that, and I experienced this also. So I left that job. I came back to the States in 2018, and 2018, 2019 were very, very difficult for me. I came back to the US and I was like, what the fuck has happened here? What is going on? Also, like, you guys, I just went through all this crazy shit, and like, people thought I was just insane, which, I had moved to Dubai. Like, I've made different choices. And so it's not crazy to just write me off as a crazy person. So I spent a couple years, like, very honestly, like, very alone and very like, okay, I'm just going to disappear quietly, right? But then 2020 happened. And I still had a lot of friends in China and all over the world. And I watched what was happening there. And I was like, this is coming here. Like, it's going to move across the West and it's going to come here. And everyone's like, no fucking way. I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
just like I'm on WeChat. Like,
Me too.
like,
My whole
yeah,
business was in China, so I know I was saying the same exact thing you were. We knew about it before
yeah,
anybody knew, even was talking about it
absolutely.
here.
Absolutely. And so then there was this tipping point, right? Then they did, it went to Italy, it went to Canada, and it came here. And in a lot of ways, that was a silver lining for me, because it sort of it validated first and foremost, like, it's fucking coming here, and everyone was just radically opposed to the fact that that was even a possibility. So a lot of people at that time, like throughout COVID, started coming back to me and saying, like, how did you know? Like, what's coming next? And also, hey, by the way, like, I remember last year you tried to tell me like this crazy story. Like, what happened? They just became a lot more willing to believe the wild things. So I am actually really thankful for COVID in many ways, because it woke a lot of people up, and it sort of saved me from this like asylum where everybody just thought I was crazy. I mean, I think people do still think I'm crazy, but it's also true what I'm talking about. So
What was it like living in that world? You're just surrounded by it just seems like there's just so much money at stake that for these people, they don't operate in the same set of rules or realities that we live in. It's almost like they live in a different reality. What was that like?
yeah, it's true. And it's isolating, it's miserable. You're selling your soul. I mean, I think there's a lot of ego, like people will ask me, do they really think that they're better than other people? And they do. Most of them do. They believe they're better than you. They believe that, they should have the right to make decisions that govern your life because you're just a silly little peasant, or, a little 15-minute city liver, and that they live above everyone else. Um, so it's difficult, and I think a lot of people come and go the way that I did, but they also are either afraid to speak out about it, or they're still, I met a girl, for example, at a Bitcoin conference last year, and I don't I got to be careful about what I say. She had been through some similar things that I had been through. She had worked in an adjacent world. And she really wanted to talk about it more, because it's hard not to talk about it. But her husband still works in a kind of related environment. Like, and so if she goes and speaks really honestly about what she went through, her husband will probably lose his job. So, there's all of these like restrictions that get kind of webbed around you. And it enables all of that to continue to go on, because the people, if you're still in it, you're incentivized. I mean, you can't stay in it and not participate, right? So if you're in it, you're participating. And if you have just sort of come and gone, most people are not in a position to turn around and be honest about what they've seen. Yeah. So it's hard, I mean, people are burning out all the time. People are getting physically ill from the stress of living. I got sick right as I was quitting. I got super sick, and it was sort of the last tipping point. I was in South Korea and I had pneumonia. It was terrible. So it's not like these people are not happy. There's a lot of money, but money doesn't make you a good person, and it doesn't buy you happiness or like give you peace.
So what was it like after you came home? I'm sure some of these days were pretty wild and you're almost like looking at yourself like, what the fuck just happened? How do you get off work, and what would you do to process all of that information? How did you kind of just continue to go back to work every day and put yourself through that over and over again?
Yeah. It took years, honestly. I didn't process it right away, and I didn't go back to work right away. I also once I did need to go back to work, I started my own consulting company because I was like, I'm never going to work for anybody again. So I was just doing some consulting using the skills that I had, and it took a long time. I was in therapy. I saw a shaman. I did all kinds of stuff. One of my consulting clients was this little retail store that sold crystal singing bowls. So I did a lot of weird shit. And it has like a cumulative effect. I
Hold on.
eventually
I
ended
want
up
to hear
like,
about this shaman. I really tell me, like, were you in a hut somewhere? Oh, is this guy like playing like banjos and drums and shit?
yes.
Yes. All right. Tell me
Yes,
all
and
about this.
if any, and he's amazing. Like I'm still friends with him.
It wasn't the J6
So
shaman, was it?
no, it wasn't. No, it was not.
All right.
But if anybody needs a shaman, let me know because I got a guy, and he's
I
into
got a
Bitcoin.
guy.
He's a Bitcoiner. He's
Yeah, I
looking
was
at
gonna say,
moving to
does he
El
accept
Salvador.
Bitcoin?
Yes, he absolutely does.
All right, all right. He's legit then. Tell us about this
He is.
shaman.
He's awesome. His name is Don, and he's just a cool guy.
No,
He
no human sacrifices or anything crazy, right?
No,
All
no,
right.
he's really, really cool. He gets it, and he's just
He
a
gets
good
it.
person doing some, alternative healing shit.
Some shaman shit, huh? So,
Yeah, yeah. And
what?
I actually have to say, like, I was very skeptical of all of that. Like, if you'd have told me, like, oh, Michelle's gonna be seeing a shot, I'd have been like, no. Like, even when I met him, I was like, what
Eyes
do
are
you
watering.
do? Like, what? Like, what? He did like a little, he's like, oh, let me look at your palm. They did like palm reading, which is like an intro, right? They like suck you in, and then you're like, oh, how'd you know that? Like,
Yeah.
sign me up for more.
Yeah.
But honestly, like all jokes aside, he ended up being like a very serious part of my healing journey. And I think whatever you have to do to heal, man, do it. I also did not ayahuasca, but
Peyote?
no, the thing where they burn the frog venom into your skin. Um
I don't know. It sounds a good time.
it was not a good time. But it was, healing. So I did a lot of weird shit, and you know, yeah.
So that's so you needed a couple years off of life after you went and
Yeah.
sold your soul to the devil, huh? Is that the moral
Yes.
of the story?
That's the moral of the story. I retired really to Florida, and I kind of went into hiding, and yeah, it took a long time to heal from that.
What year was that?
It was 2018 and 2019.
Oh, so
It's
you were
can't
in the belly of the beast while they were planning COVID.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I was in the belly of the beast in 2016 and 17 were the years that I was in all of that. So I don't know if COVID was in the works. It's not something that like ever, I had
Presented
ever even
itself.
heard
Yeah.
whispers of or saw. But, you know, if you'd have told me like this is what they're planning, I mean, yeah, obviously, So when it started happening in China, I just knew, like, I knew what was going to happen. Of course, the details flesh out, but like the larger agenda and some of the like bullet points are just, like and I actually have spent a lot of time talking about this. It's not, COVID's not the only thing that was exported from China. There's a lot of things, and this is a regular pattern where things happen in China because they have, the totalitarian regime. They can do whatever the fuck they want. So they do. And the West is watching and participating to a much larger extent than people want to admit.
Mm-hmm.
And they see certain things and they're like, all right, we're going to get in on that. But we're going to repackage it and we're going to call it this. And we're going to pretend that it's for your own safety. Like, I mean, China at least has the balls, like, not to lie about it. China's just like, fuck you. We're, you can't do this or that because we said so.
Yep.
And so that was one of the hot takes that I came back with was the US actually worse. in some ways than China, because the US, there's still this illusion of privacy. There's an illusion of freedom, and that's all that it is. It's been completely eroded. And, you know, people are still not ready to be honest about that. I mean, we've got political prisoners in jail without, you know, due process. I know you know a lot about this. And so I'm really like, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and Bitcoin is really, really important to me. But I just, you know, I posted the other day, there's actually one thing that I care about more than Bitcoin, and that's freedom. And it's true. I mean, you know, people like to say Bitcoin doesn't care, but ask Ross Albright, you know, ask Snowden, Assange, ask them how important freedom is, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have or fiat money or whatever it is. It doesn't matter at all what you have if you don't have freedom. And the US is not the bastion of freedom that it used to be. You know, like, I lived in Dubai, and Dubai's a strict place. You know, like, I would not break the rules in Dubai, and I'm smart enough to like discern that, right? Like, you commit a crime, there are very serious punishments. But in return, what you get is like one of the safest places to live in the world. And that was really enjoyable. And there's a lot of freedom in that. I'm not going to say, obviously, that like China is free. It's not. But it's black and white in China. You know what the rules are. You don't fucking speak up. And I think there's a very serious comparison that can and should be made to what's happening in the United States, where everyone's running around pretending that you're allowed to speak up. But you have to be careful about what you say. And that does not give us freedom, right? Because if we don't know the rules, if we don't know what's legal or illegal, because, you know, it depends who you are, what political class you're part of, what opinions you hold specifically, that really dictates how they apply the laws. And they're not even making laws anymore. They're ruling by regulation and by enforcement. You know, there's this whole complex set of regulation by which they function now. We saw that they just, you know, renewed FISA Section 702. They broadly expanded its powers. It's not a law. You know, it's an emergency decree. They changed the definition of some words in the emergency powers, and now they have a massively expanded spying powers, you know, and people have no idea that any of this is going on. And the people that do, I think, are scared to speak up. So anyway, you know, none of that is freedom. And then you start to speak about it and you get enough attention and you're going to get shut down. You know, I know that you know this. So like, how is that free? Like, it's not. So at least if I go to China, I know, keep my fucking mouth shut. I know that I can't go to google.com, you know, like I know what I can and can't do. And it's obviously a much more complex situation than that, but there's a very serious comparison to be made. And I think it's a conversation people should be having.
So it's rare that I get to have this conversation with anybody, because you were in the WeChat and you were involved in watching COVID come before everybody else, right? I had pulled my son out of school in February, right? Like, nobody was talking about COVID here until March. Right. If you remember like the exact dates, right? Like, we first started hearing about it in January. By February, if you were talking with people in China, you were fully watching these videos. And I want to know, so I was watching these videos and what my friends in China were telling me. And then I was showing them to all of my friends. I was like, hey guys, like, this shit's coming here. Pay attention. Right. Like, everything's about to change, right? And at the time, I thought I was helping people, right? Like, I thought COVID was real and I was sharing their propaganda, right? Yeah. And then me too, after you were, that's what I wanted to ask you that. And I wanted to know, and I look back too at you were in Bitcoin in 2017. Were you through that bull run? Were you through the 2020 bull run then? Obviously you were, if you were here. Do you remember like So when I was into videography and other stuff, I started my channel on crypto back in 2015. I was like one of the first people making how to mine Ethereum videos. And then I didn't realize like how to grow a YouTube channel or what it was. So I kind of stepped away from it. Then I took the money I made from crypto, started a business. And then throughout there, I got really good at videography and photography. So I started teaching people on YouTube how to make videos on photography and whatever. And then I went into work one day. I was working as a controls engineer. My buddy's like, oh, hey, man, you used to make videos on crypto. Like, why don't you go make another video on crypto? And I was like, okay, cool. So I just made one, right? In that video, my normal videos were getting like 100, 200, 1,000 views. This one got 5,000 overnight. And he's like, oh, bro, do it again, right? I did it again, 10,000. And what I realized was that the government has the ability to make something trend, right? Like, so if they wanted Bitcoin and crypto to boom, so Sam Bankman-Fried could come on and they could sneak in this central bank digital currency, which is Circle, which is their CBDC, right? And Solana came out at the exact perfect timing. And so did Star Atlas, which was a fake game and a scam. But if you watch how Sam Bankman-Fried, basically sponsored Solana, and Solana, then he created Radium, and then the government comes in with Circle and goes, oh, you want to use these games, right? The only thing you can use that is their central bank digital currency, their CBDC. Yeah. So it was just like the government had the ability to create a trend. And by using these algorithms, right? Like I honestly wanted to stay making videos about videography. That was my passion, right? But they didn't do anything. So it's like, oh, I have to do all this work when I can put out a video that takes me 10 minutes, no prep. I don't have to get all my cameras right. So I was incentivized. And then I watched it with COVID, right? Like when I was putting out a video and telling people COVID was bad, that thing was going through the freaking roof, right? So it was like the algorithm incentivized people to be pro-COVID. And then after you first started telling your friends and then it started to happen, you were right. So you were like incentivized to like share more and be like, oh, I told you I was right, right? And then it was by the time you realized it was a scam, your ego was almost so tied to the fact that COVID was bad. It was hard, even when people were presenting with facts, like, hey, dude, those masks don't work. You're like, masks don't fucking work, right? Like, I'm putting a mask on. You're like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it was, did I make any sense there? I just ramble on.
Yeah, no, you made a lot of sense. And the algorithm, I spent 10 years in tech while this shit was coming up. So that's like its own conversation, which I would love to have with you. But to COVID and, you just made me actually really thankful. I was like anonymously on Reddit during this time. Like I was not on Twitter. I was in hiding, right? And sort of retired and licking my wounds. Yeah. And so I'm thankful for that, because if you could go back and audit like what I was thinking and saying, like, I don't know, I may have like 1 million followers. I might be like already in the gulag. I'm not sure. But it was a rapid, I went through all of it pretty quickly. And I think some of that was probably because I was doing it privately, right? So there was no one like reinforcing anything. I was really, really scared at first. Like, no, I shouldn't say really scared, but I was
cautious.
I was like, they're fucking releasing a virus. Like we need to know. And I don't know that we even knew it was a virus initially. COVID, like China's releasing some sort of bioweapon, like wipe down your groceries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, my groceries. Yeah, I was doing that while these clowns were on like MSNBC saying like, no, go to Chinatown. Like, like, no, stop the flights and like all these things. And then once the politicians started, once that all changed, and it changed very quickly, once the politicians started saying like, you must take this very seriously, I was like, okay, wait, there's more to this. I think they're full of shit, right? And I went to, so my stepmom's like a biochemical engineer, right? And I was sick for a while, like in my mid-20s. I had late stage Lyme disease. So I learned a lot about like diseases, bacteria, viruses. A lot of people don't even know like the difference between a bacteria and a virus. They're like using their antibacterial. Like, it's a virus, right? Like you're killing bacteria, which is cool, but like COVID's a fucking virus. And everybody, you sound like you're hurting my feelings. Like, fuck off. So I went through it pretty quickly. I went from like, fuck, let's wipe down our groceries and stay in the house. Like I had so much toilet paper. I literally still have Clorox wipes because I was prepping like while everyone was running around, like it's fine.
Yeah.
And then as they, they really dialed up the propaganda. And so I was like, this is clearly propaganda. So I'm not doing any of it. Right. And luckily I live in Florida. So I was able to do that. And my life just went on other than, like doom scrolling the internet and watching like how it was playing out. But I was over it. Like I was. So yeah, there was a period of time, it was just much earlier than everyone else. And then I'm sure had I been doing it publicly, like you said, that it'd have been more difficult because you just get more entrenched in what you think, right? So you're like warning early about it. And then there's a lot more to consider if you're going to like totally revoke your position or 360 your position. I was really just dealing with like my friends and family and the people that were around me. So there's less, I
less
changed my
ego.
mind.
Yeah, less ego involved.
Yeah.
And that's how how do you compare that to like people that are anti-Bitcoin, right? Like they have the stance of anti-Bitcoin, right? And then your ego gets involved and it's a public ego. So you've said Bitcoin's bad, I would never buy it.
Right.
Because you're uneducated about it. And then once you get educated, there's that barrier that you kind of have to get by. How do you think that plays into like what's happening right here, right now?
I think it's a really significant factor. I think the more entrenched someone is in the traditional finance scheme, whether that is because they are working in the SEC or even just in their own life, they've been very successful. So they have a lot of fiat and, it's entrenched in all of these traditional like structures. The more entrenched you are in the legacy system, the harder it is to get out of it or to admit that it's all a house of cards or to admit that, you spent your entire life working for something that they can just print for free. Oh, and that they do, so I think ego is involved, but also just it's hard to unlearn things, right? I think we talked about like how I grew up and how I, have had this very non-traditional life, which I think has benefited me because I was never really indoctrinated. But when you are indoctrinated and you go to the government schools your whole life and then you go to college and it's just propaganda and then you get a job and you just kind of do the next right thing, you're very ingrained in the legacy system and you're very propagandized and ego's a factor, but just admitting that everything that you've structured your life around is a lie, like that's really hard for people to do.
So it seems like you've built into this position and it seems like you're pretty close with your parents. Did you ever have a moment where you like came home and you went full Alex Jones on your mom? You're like, they're chemtrails in the sky. They're put the frogs are gay, mom. Like, or was this just like a slow thing where you kind of like
no, all the time, every like all the time, like bless my parents and anyone that is like real friends with me in my real life because it's nonstop. I mean, they have a lot of patience and I'm so thankful that they still love me. Some of it, there's like a sliding scale of what they're willing to like talk about, participate in. So yeah, no, it's great. Luckily they're all engineers. So, they're kind of autistic and I'll start going off on someone and my dad will start like quoting physics books and no, that's not true because, the chemicals are this and it's like, okay, I'm going to lose this argument. Like whether I'm right or wrong, like he just has too much data to throw at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what are your parents? I know we're kind of running up on that time stop. You got a hard stop at 11, so we got about 5 minutes. What are your parents' outlooks on Bitcoin? What is your dad? Have you ever shared Giovanni's work on the power laws, the physics of Bitcoin?
Fuck that shit.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think that's really stupid. To be fair, I haven't spent that much time looking at it, but I don't put really any weight into anyone's charts. The only like chart-ish that I care about is if you zoom out and you look at like the epochs and like the 4-year cycle, and we generally get a parabolic run 12 to 18 months after a halving. We get an 80 to 88% drawdown. I mean, That's the only chart that I care about. And I think that explains volatility. But no, yeah. The thing, so I spent many years preaching like an insane person about Bitcoin to my parents. I will say, because they're engineers, the thing that really got them, I think that was kind of the turning point where it went from, this is just our daughter's like newest crazy thing that she's ranting about, to maybe this is something we should spend a little more time like looking at and considering, was the interview that Michael Saylor did with Tucker Carlson. I think it's long. It's like an hour something long. But if you have anybody in your life that's an engineer in particular, just tie them to a chair and make them watch that interview. And I think he really explains it. Like, he's great at explaining things, I think. But the way that he does it in particular in that interview really resonated with my parents, because they're engineers and he's an engineer, and, it just worked out. So it's been a very long process. I have orange pilled them. I'm working on getting them, it's getting them further orange pilled, but I think they get it, and they've got a little bit of Bitcoin.
They do. Good.
They do.
Well, I know we're getting right on that time stop, and I have so many more questions. I wish we had more time. I would continue this for another couple hours. So I hopefully that you'll come back, because we haven't got to hear anything about the company that you work for, or what's going on and what your work you're doing in the Bitcoin community. So I really hope that you'll come back and join us whenever you get time. I know you're super busy, and I want to give you the floor to promote your company and tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you. It was great speaking with you as well. I will definitely come back and we'll talk more. I want to talk to you about social media algorithms. But I work for an incredible company called Byte Federal. They're one of the original Bitcoin ATM companies based here in Florida. So I do product development for them. I manage our digital product development. So we have a Bitcoin wallet that you can use. It's fully Lightning enabled. And we have a merchant system. That is my Twitter profile. There's Byte Federal. And you can find me on Twitter. It's really the only social media that I have. I only have one account. It's verified. There's a bunch of imposters out there right now DMing people. So no, it's not me. I will not DM you. But yeah, so Byte Federal is really, a software development company in the fintech space. We have a lot of Bitcoin products, including the Bitcoin ATMs, the wallet, the point of sale, and it's an incredible company. A lot of our developers come from, former communist countries, and they're fighting for freedom. The ATMs are built 100% in the United States. They're assembled. We wrote the code that runs the machines. We maintain the networks. We do everything in-house. So.
Wow. That sounds like an amazing company. I can't wait to hear more about it. So I look forward to having you back on the show whenever you get time.
Yeah, for sure. We will definitely connect and talk further. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you so much for coming on, Michelle. God bless.
You too. Have a great afternoon.
Bye. All right, folks, that's a wrap over here on the Ryan Matta Show. Do me a solid on the way out the door. If you guys could please smash that like button and then swing down to the description. I've left notes down there with Michelle's profile. Please swing over and follow her on Twitter, as well as Byte Federal. And I also posted her Substack, where she puts out amazing articles as well. So please consider swinging over there and supporting her work. She does amazing work. God bless each and every one of you. We'll see you guys later.
Run.